Welcome to the latest edition of Russia Unmasked from the Center for Russian Studies in Kyiv, in which we challenge propaganda published by the Kremlin against Ukraine and share Ukrainian perspectives. My name is Tony Meehan. I'm based in London. First, let's have a short prayer for Ukraine. Long may she survive, endure, and prevail. We open this edition of Russian Unmasked with Russian President's video address to the Russian nation celebrating a former Soviet military holiday. It was sort of during the Stalin times, 1936 and 1990. February 23rd was observed as the Soviet Army and Navy Day. And if you think that February 24th was the invasion day of Ukraine, there may be some significance in that. It became a normal workday in 1991. And the Russian parliament introduced it as a public holiday, a new public holiday in 2002, after renaming it as Defender of the Fatherland Day, possibly to honor Vladimir Putin. Who knows? Anyway, in his video address, Putin stressed his intention to continuously strengthen the combat capabilities of all branches of the Russian armed forces, with particular focus on modernizing and developing new weapons systems, including elements of the nuclear triad. And for those of you who think that may be something Chinese, if you're not familiar with nuclear jargon, a nuclear triad is a three-pronged military force of global range and land-based intercontinental ballistic missiles, submarine-launched ballistic missiles, and strategic bombers with nuclear bombs and missiles. That's education over for today. He also pledged, this is Putin, to increase the force's combat readiness and the ability to operate in the most difficult conditions. Putin then proceeded to describe Russian soldiers who are committing war crimes, killing civilians, raping civilians, destroying Ukrainian cities as true patriots and the pillar and support of the state, glorifying participants in the genocidal war and elevating them to the new elite within society. In addition, the Russian leader declared 2026 as the year of unity of the peoples of Russia around a sacred duty, which refers to the destruction of Ukraine, another example to reinforce his blasphemy of a holy war. The ability to come together and achieve victory in the name of common goals exemplifies the tremendous strength of our army, said Putin, and our multi-ethnic society. It has always been that way for centuries, and I am confident it will always be so. Yeah, let's have a look at that in a few years' time. Given Russia's heavy losses in Ukraine, this rhetoric is aimed at rallying the population around further aggressive plans, suppressing potential separatist sentiments in the different regions of Russia, and justifying the continued use of ethnic minorities in the meat grinders of assaults. Overall, the speech contains no hints of peaceful resolution and is clearly intended to ideologically mobilize Russians with the ideas of war, militarism, opposition to other nations. To put it succinctly, Putin is going nowhere except to war, currently against Ukraine and others in the future. You could say it's a Russian narrative for the foreign market, but also for the home market. Not quite in response, but a good response nonetheless. President Zelenskyy has come out against more Russian propaganda, claiming that there are no divisions in Ukraine's negotiating team, that it is a Russian narrative. A report in the Economist paper about alleged disagreements between Ukraine's negotiating team in mid-February has emerged within Ukraine's negotiating team. According to the report, some negotiators support Kirill Budanov, head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, in favor of a rapid agreement with Russia under US auspices, while others, a group associated with the former presidential office head, Andrei Yermak, are more cautious. In response, in an interview with Clash, Zelenskyy said, "What the Economist says sounds quite offensive. I am doing everything I can to ensure the various channels of communication between Ukrainians and Americans, or even between Russians and Ukrainians, are all in the same format. Zelenskyy added the Economist was repeating a Russian narrative about divisions within the Ukraine delegation during the negotiations. The fact is, the Russians constantly want to divide the Ukraine delegation, and I'm afraid the Economist has got a little confused, mistaking desire for reality. That's a nice put down, isn't it? Mistaking desire for reality. The Russians, he continues, are constantly trying to do this. They make claims about disagreements or contradictions within the Ukrainian delegation without any justification. Zelenskyy recalled Russia is demanding the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donbass in order to obtain easily what it has failed to achieve on the battlefield for years. A quick peace with the withdrawal from Donbass is precisely what the Russians want. How to get Donbass quickly without losing Russian personnel. And a quick end to the war was actually our idea, the head of state. This is President Zelenskyy. He also stressed that US President Trump is strong enough to exert pressure on Russia. Our next story, again propaganda, comes from the BBC, who reports on the introduction of AI, artificial intelligence, as a Russian propaganda weapon. Now, we shouldn't be surprised that AI has crept into the war of propaganda, should we? The Russians' disinformation network, Matryoshka, used AI-generated videos to discredit Ukrainian athletes at the recent Winter Olympics in Milan and Cortina. Pablo Maristani of the Institute of Strategic Dialogue said, "What truly set Matryoshka apart is the use of AI voiceovers to impersonate voices of trusted figures." Darren Linville, another advisor, a disinformation expert at the Clemson University, they take a real video of a real person, but partway through they switch to stock footage overlaid with deepfake narration, that's words, that sounds just like the real person, so they can insert absurd lies that appear to be more authentic. In the video examined by BBC journalists, viewers initially see a genuine press conference by the International Olympic Committee President, Kirsty Coventry, that was broadcast on Euronews. However, a few seconds, Coventry's real voice is replaced by that of her AI clone. And the video creates the impression that the president, IOC president, is outraged that Ukrainian athletes have come to Milan for crazy political PR, that they are behaving aggressively, and that she has never encountered people this irritating, I swear, quote unquote, or not quote unquote in this instance. Footage from the actual press conference clearly shows Coventry said nothing of the sort. BBC Verify also established that the same tactic was used to discredit Ukrainian athletes by fabricating a fake commentary attributed to an American commentator at the Winter Games. In addition, Canadian broadcaster CBC has reported an AI-generated video featuring one of its journalists. Moving on. We're going to our favourite Hungarian, or perhaps not favourite Hungarian, Viktor Orbán. A simple quote from President Zelenskyy confirms his recognition of Orban's deceit and how to use it to find the truth. In thanking President Orban, or Prime Minister Orban, President Zelenskyy said he pushes all of us to be better. He pushes all of us to be better. This was at a European conference recently. You can ignore or accept Zelenskyy's sarcasm, but you cannot ignore the truth, which he tells us very clearly we must be on our guard against the plots and ploys of Orban and his Russian master. For example, last year, Hungary voted to grant and pass an EU loan for $90 billion to Ukraine. And then recently, when it came to the vote to start moving the money through, Hungary didn't vote. So therefore that meant that the 27 nations were not in union, it wasn't a total complete vote, and therefore I had to stall things. So despite voting for the 90 billion last year, this year they blocked the final approval. Hungary's reason for blocking the loan is its accusation, more hyperbole and more propaganda, I should say, that Ukraine stopped the flow of oil and gas to Hungary through the pipeline, which was attacked and damaged by Russian drones. So the fact that the oil couldn't get through to Hungary because of a Russian attack, Hungary then decides to penalise Ukraine by not approving the 90 billion loan which it approved before. I am talking euros, by the way, not anything else. Ukraine's response was quite interesting because it recommended that Hungary express their concerns and objections to Moscow, who attacked the pipeline and therefore responsible for the damage and the closure of the pipeline. The next bit of propaganda from Hungary is that the Hungarian Foreign Minister, Peter Szijjártó, in a conversation with journalists ahead of an EU Foreign Affairs Council meeting, again accused Ukraine of pursuing an anti-Hungarian policy and of hatred towards his country. So therefore, it's setting a scene before the meeting starts that whatever they're going to do, they're doing it because Hungary believes that Ukraine hates them. And he said that Ukraine was behaving in a hostile manner towards Hungary and suggested asking Ukrainians why they had stopped oil supplies to Hungary. So it's the same story going out, and it's being regurgitated, as they say. He also claimed that the European Commission is behaving like a Ukrainian Commission, putting Ukrainians' interests above those of Hungary. He stressed that Hungary's decision to suspend support for sanctions and a loan is linked to the fact that Ukraine has decided not to restore the oil to Hungary. In response, in fair response, the European Commission spokesman Balázs Ujvári said, as reported in European Pravda, the European Commission expects Hungary and other European states to follow through on the agreements reached by the leaders in December 2025 and approve the 90 billion loan of support to Ukraine. Let's see what happens. Well, that's all for now. So from all of us here at the Center of Russian Studies in Kyiv, thank you. Please share this podcast with your friends and those you think who will be interested. The online address is Russia Unmasked at YouTube. We'll be back with more news from Kyiv soon. Until then, Slava Ukraini. Ukrainians were, are and always will be here. Vladimir Zelenskyy. Thank you again.